Hi, you're watching India Post Live. I'm Shivraj, and today we're discussing the Indian Readership Survey of 2013 that was issued earlier this year, causing a lot of controversy with 18 publications up in arms saying that the findings about readership being down were wrong. You can also join in on the conversation by joining in on indiapostlive.com. You can tweet with us at hashtag IndiaPostLive. Also tweet with us at the handle of @IndiaPostLive. Right, India's largest and only authoritative readership survey, the Indian Readership Service or the Survey or the IRS, ran into controversy when it came out with figures for 2013 in February. Several publications have rejected the findings. It's gone to court, and the Indian Newspaper Society says that its methodology is flawed. Let's take a look at that controversy.
The report of India's largest and only newspaper readership survey, the IRS, has created a major controversy. According to the survey, the readership of English newspapers has plummeted from 1.82 crore to 1.49 crore during the last year. This means newspapers have lost 33.5 lakh readers. Media buyers and publishers are refusing to believe these numbers and are questioning the methodology of the survey. In the wake of this controversy, the findings have been put in abeyance and subscribers are not allowed to use it for marketing purpose. But the question is, are these figures indicative of a reality that big newspaper publications do not wish to see? Has India reached a digital stage where print is being replaced by digital media much faster than it was envisaged?
So that's the anomaly that a lot of the newspapers are saying just don't stand, because India is actually one of the largest really newspaper reading countries or nations despite the digital phenomenon. Well, joining us in studio to discuss the entire controversy is Srinivas Ramini, who is a senior assistant editor at the Economic and Political Weekly. Srinivas, of course, a lot of developments have taken place because HT, which is one of the papers that was said to be told that their readership was up, went to the High Court. They've got an interim stay on being able to use the findings, but the findings in itself are still in abeyance, aren't they?
Yeah, the findings are, as your report points out, quite controversial in the sense that nobody would have expected that in the age of high literacy and growing English leadership, English literacy per se, why would suddenly newspapers suddenly see a decline in readership? So that means there was that's the question that the INS is asking and newspapers are asking. But you have to understand that this survey conducted by the IRS was the first of its kind. Radically new different and new methodology was adopted, which was not the same as before, and which included the kind of questionnaires that were prepared and the format of the format of interviewing people and getting to know their opinions, and also the these actually made some kind of a difference, and that's why UCC suddenly drastically changed numbers. Having said that, there are still some anomalies within the report. For example, one newspaper being quoted as having zero readership in a particular place. So these problems are there. So while one has to definitely take the findings with a pinch of salt, there are some parts of the survey results which are which are logical in some sense.
All right, we're also joined by Devdas Rajaram from the Asian College of Journalism in Chennai. Devdas, what Srinivas was pointing out very interestingly is that the methodology is where a lot of people are finding fault. The Hindu newspaper in some places was seen as having absolutely zero readership, which clearly isn't possible, is it?
What I find quite clear is a news organization has to move a court of law to contest the methodology. The methodology of readership surveys rather than the actual role of journalism. This is what I find extremely hilarious. People contesting the methodology rather than actual impact of journalism on the social conditions and living conditions. Yes, actually the figures, the internal figures, because I'm privy to some of the figures from internal circulation managers, which tell quite a different story altogether. It's completely different from what the ABC figures actually point out. It's much lesser than that. But I can't quote you for certain, for that. But it's a different figure. But what I'm worried most about is not the figures as per se. It's people contesting the figures. So the game is something else. The whole point is that this is just driving the conversation away to a completely irrelevant focus.
So, Devdas,
which
do you
is
think
who's telling the truth?
do you think that the way the newspapers are sort of reacting is perhaps symptomatic of the way the newspaper industry has gone, where advertising and advertorial seems to be getting more play than actual content and journalism and news the way it was supposed to be traditionally?
No, my feeling is, the way the vociferous way they're reacting is actually triggered by a sort of they're panicked. Somebody is panicking. What I feel is, three things. This all this service, particularly from the legacy media, what they are trying to ignore is not print versus online. Actually, I disagree with the title of this debate. It's not print versus online. Actually, what I feel is three things are going to define define not readership, even what the J. Rosen College people formerly known as audience, the participants. So one is a lot of people tend to forget the fact that 54% of the country's population, which is a whopping 540 million people, are under 25. And number two, smartphone consumption in this country is growing by 65%, now started 80.5 million. And thirdly, the number of English-speaking population in this country is roughly between 100 and 200 million people, which is the population roughly half of Europe. So here, the consumption habit of this population is going to define whether newspapers are going to survive in its traditional form and as in a print, or in some other ways. So I have a problem with this whole title, the print versus online, which does take into consideration the news consumption, the habit of consumption.
Sure. And the habit of consumption, Srinivas, is what we were talking about earlier as well. The fact is that the survey doesn't factor in how these newspapers are being consumed online.
At least from what I know, I'm sure that they haven't really taken this aspect into consideration. But having said that, if you look at the Alexa ratings, which is one of the ways of judging, the online readership of various websites, look at the Alexa ratings of some of the newspapers such as the Hindu, the Hindustan Times, Indian Express. Times of India, of course, functions like the rubric of India Times, so it's difficult to find out if people visit the Times of India site more than the India Times site. Some of the ratings of this, the Alexa ratings for all these print newspapers are very high. That means that lots of people read these papers online. So and I think in some sense the newspapers have also started rethinking their advertising strategy. So now that many people are moving online, as our panelists pointed out, many people have access to smartphones, many people have access to the internet. Internet connectivity has risen in leaps and bounds over the last few years. I think more and more readers are being pushed online. And also because of the fact that online publication of news is still free. It's not under payment gateways. My publication is still under the payment gateway for the archives. So many people are driven to read things online, and that also offers them a variety of content and
why not? Because smartphones penetration has gone up. So we're also joined by Dhanya, who's the managing editor of News Minute. Now, Dhanya, what do you make of the INS or the Indian Newspaper Society going up in arms, going to litigation, trying to stop the Indian Readership Survey's findings this time around?
The Readership Survey's findings has been challenged by the Hindu and various other publications who are saying that some of the figures are just not believable. But the fact remains that whether these figures are believable or not, that's of course left to Delhi High Court or the Supreme Court to decide later. But the fact remains that many people are choosing to go to digital mediums. There is, of course, the influx of television, 24-hour news channels, not just in English or Hindi, but vernacular languages too. For example, if you take the southern states, like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, there is an increase of news outlets, whether it's digital medium, whether it's television. So people really are spoiled with choices. And I think that's one reason, convenience, more choices, which is perhaps why people opt to perhaps even look at something online. Like, for example, the Hindu, which has gone all out against the survey. They will also try to revamp their website perhaps every 1 month, every 2 months, because they realize that a lot of their readership also comes through online medium. So I think Indian newspaper industry has to wake up to the reality that it is time they have good websites, they update their websites properly. If you check some of the websites, because I don't want to take names, but some of the stories could be 3 days old, 4 days old. Even what is coming on the print editions is not updated on these sites. So it is time they wake up to the reality that India is going online, that India is watching more and more of television in whatever language it may be.
All right, Danya, thank you. We also joined from Baltimore, the United States, by Bappa. Bappa, you know, there was this whole phenomenon of the United States publications sort of slowly shutting shop and it all going digital. Do you think digital is now really the future, even in India as well? How do you consume news about India, sitting there in Baltimore?
No, of course. I mean, I have no choice but to consume it digitally. I mean, I can't access print newspapers. But I think I agree with the earlier speaker from Chennai who said that the title of your show is not really relevant anymore. Print is dying, and I mean, the march of technology is in the digital direction, and whatever protestations the newspapers might be making, they have to realize that in the next 5 to 7 years, um, their readership, the print readership is going to go down even more drastically. So they can keep on contesting findings of this survey, but this mirrors reality. And the U.S. In the U.S. basically the newspapers have been decimated by the digital revolution, and I think the similar thing will happen in India also. But I think the more important point, why more and more English-speaking consumers of news in India are moving to digital platforms, is because of the crisis of credibility of the legacy newspapers. And ever since the paid news committee uh, came out with its findings, and the press council tried to bury it, there's been a series of scandals in the Indian media, which the legacy mainstream newspapers and the legacy news channels have tried to cover up, including the Radia tapes.
All right.
And what consumers
you know,
like
just hold that
me,
thought, Bappa, because we're going to Bappa, we're going to come to that point as well. The
Right.
whole phenomenon of paid news and the fact that advertising is now driving what was once thought of as a noble profession. We're going to go to Danya because Danya has a point to make an intervention. Go ahead, Danya.
I have a small difference of opinion here because if you look at statistics of online media, which is actually doing well in India, you have Dainik Bhaskar, you have NDTV, you have First Post, which is of course an extension of Network 18. You have the Hindustan Times doing well now. So these are actually mainstream media, even on the digital platforms. The Times of India, of course, it is the mainstream media's digital platforms which are doing well. It is the mainstream media houses whose digital platforms are doing well. So I don't think the paid media argument really works that way. Yes, people are believing less and less of what they're reading, but they're still going back to the same guys. So there's of course a lot of alternate media popping up here and there, but that's not at all comparable to the numbers which the traditional media houses have.
Right, Danya. We're also joined in studio by Sanjay Singh, senior political editor at First Post. I think the discussion has been veering around the fact that while the newspapers are up in arms with the IRS survey, at some level, a lot of the traditional publications are still being read online.
Yeah, precisely. Traditional, as Danya was pointing it out, traditional papers, the biggest thing which traditional media has is that of credibility, A. B, in people's mind, those newspaper, you also get used to certain things, getting a newspaper in morning and go through variety of pages. But the new media, digital media has the advantage of updating news, and B, also there is no fixed line to say of a newspaper, as in a newspaper there is a fixed line as to what bureau chief would say or chief reporter would say or ultimately editor would say, that line would prevail. Here you can have 10 kinds of
absolutely, the agenda is changing a little.
Yeah, and also this mobile phone revolution has really done it for the digital media, because so many people are accessing this particular thing through his or her phone, and plus these iPads and these tablets. that is making the difference. But the only thing that digital media requires is also a bit of credibility. And if you see, as top 5, of course, traditional media houses are there. But that also is because of the recall value that Times of India or NDTV
Absolutely.
or CN or IBN Live or
So
Hindustan
then why are they
Times
griping
has.
so much over the IRS survey? If they already have that mind share, that recall, why is it that one survey that says that there is a percentage point down or a couple of percent points down and that one publication seems to still be up on the rise? Why are they kind of creating such a scene?
That threat is there. That threat that digital media is coming, and this is coming to be real, and also because in digital media you don't require that kind of paraphernalia. A small group with intelligent ideas and good set of communication network and smart systems can get into this particular thing. Secondly, if you look at print media, you often get in print media news that had been there yesterday morning, that was there yesterday afternoon, that was there
Interestingly,
yesterday
it's
evening.
the same battle when 24 hours television
and
came in
then
as well.
you go next morning, see same things. Unless until print media also reinvents, there is a need for print media to reinvent. Some media houses are slowly reinventing themselves. That is not very visible if you compare a day's paper. But yes, some of the print media is gradually reinventing. And there is also ideas in several media houses, print media houses, that they should reinvent in such a way that they also carry good deal of analysis and also the news.
Right, and go beyond that. And I'll just come back to Srinivas because I think Devdas from ACJ had a point to make. Go ahead, Devdas.
Yeah, two things actually. I disagree with the gentleman who spoke just before me, that it's a threat. I don't see this as a threat. Why can't the print and online coexist as The Guardian is doing fantastically well? Okay, here, why we had to think of two things here. One is, I don't know how many of you are aware of the recently leaked New York Times innovation report. This is a leak to BuzzFeed, of all people. And this is an internal report which was not supposed to be seen by outside world. But unfortunately, some executives after Jill Abramson left New York Times, it was leaked to BuzzFeed. And this, if you haven't read it, you have to read that. It talks about what New York Times has been doing to bring in the digital first mindset. And for all of us thought that New York Times is at the forefront of digital mindset. It's not. Their own report says they are not. They're way too far behind. And three, they mentioned in that report, they mentioned 3 publications as the benchmark. One is Huffington Post, 2 is BuzzFeed, and 3 is Vox.com. So how a legacy organization, which is more than 150-year-old, and which is digitally, which have invested millions and millions of dollars into digital, since Snowfall, from Snowfall and on the data visualization, including all sorts of gimmicks, and they are talking about themselves. Then they are realizing, they're admitting that they are way too behind to Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, and Vox.com.
Right.
2, why I contest this about threat. Why you had to think about this now. The way I see future is the print is going to be just explanatory journalism. Breaking news is going to be on mobile, and most of the breaking stories and the live events are going to be on mobile in live reporting and live login. And
Right.
Vox.com does the explanatory journalism, which is going to be the function of print media. That way, print and online are going to coexist. It's not, one is not going to be a threat. It's
Sure.
like saying that when I come from a fax generation.
Sure,
A
sure.
fax generation. Nobody called it fax journalism.
Sure. No, we got the point, Devdas. I think Srinivas,
When we
you
move
had a
down-
point. Earlier you'd also talked about the Alexa report as well. There is a lot of rethinking, like Sanjay said, and the professor was also alluding to about now a lot of soul searching as well as to what kind of tone and tenor you take, but you have to coexist both with online and with the print as well.
Just to answer your earlier question, why is the newspaper society and various media organizations so riled up about this report per se? If at all their readership online is increasing, why should they be so bothered about this report? You see, for all the good things about digital journalism and all the good things about digital media, and it's good that trees are not going to be cut so much in the future. The revenue models in the digital space are still not well laid out. And that's precisely the reason why, while there are news aggregators like Huffington Post doing pretty well, BuzzFeed, etc. They're news aggregators. They are not necessarily traditional media organizations in that sense, where they really put out investigative stories. And Huffington Post does it in a better way with respect to other news aggregators, but they're still not equal to New York Times in that respect. The problem is that the New York Times can't just simply overhaul its revenue model. Print still happens to be the traditional model of publishing news in print is a way you have a solid revenue model, because you have advertising in terms of ads and the entire commercial space that's there on the print. Some newspapers in India, like the Times of India, for example, get their entire revenues through advertising. The subscription plays a very minor role there. Some newspapers still have a large component of its revenue coming from subscription and circulation and so on. So the newspapers therefore are worried. If there is a report that says that people are reading your newspaper less, even if they're reading your newspaper more,
it does impact then the advertising.
It does impact the advertising,
Right.
and that's why they are so bothered about what the survey is pointing out precisely.
Sanjay, to the point of what the ACJ professor was saying, and what you had also said, that I think the approach to storytelling will have to change. Print journalism will have to take a second or third wave relook at the way they approach stories now, because the next day when someone opens a newspaper, because some of us are still traditionalists and still want to have that newspaper thrown at our door in the mornings, we do want to see something different.
See, there are two things. At the he said, she said kind of journalism, and next day if you open up morning papers and there is only he said, she said, then you are not interested in that particular piece of paper.
We already know
Secondly, you have designated spaces for fixed kind of, you are fed what they want to feed you. Here the readers have variety of choices. Either they want to look at that particular story or they don't want to look at that particular story. Then you also pay for reading those stories. Here you don't pay anything to read those stories. Of course, whatever you are subscribing, paying on internet, that is besides the point. Secondly, as a journalist, the traditional setup has still not come to terms with the digital media. For instance, when I was in print media, I would have greater access to people concerned and bureaucratic or political setup than I do have at the moment. Yes, over a certain period of time, you get to know people and
Sure,
you get that
relationships
particular access.
endure.
But otherwise, that mindset is there. Till few years back or few months back, there was no space for digital media accreditation in the INB ministry. Now that is gradually changes. And this election has also proved that digital media per se and social media, that is a separate point for discussion, has proved that this particular thing is advancing. People are not only relying on the paper that they get in morning, but they are also relying on various other things. And there, this digital media is advancing, and of course, that is the future. One point that he pointed out was about the revenue. Of course, that is also there. The threat word that I said and objection was taken, it may not be threat, but this is advancing.
Right.
You call it whatever you want to call, but yes,
Right.
that particular thing is there. Several media houses in India also, they are investing huge amount of money, time, space and money in that particular thing.
Absolutely. And Danya, just coming to you, I think you'd also raised the point that some of the traditional media houses have a lot of following online, but clearly the kind of tone and tenor, the approach to storytelling, the being up to the minute, up to date, even beyond the 24-hour news channels, breaking stories before, that's happening a lot, isn't it?
Of course, there is a lot of change. In fact, if you go to Twitter or any of the social medias, you see that the print is competing with television when it comes to putting out news quickly, getting reactions quicker. But the problem, I think, for me, for example, I watch television a lot. I check online stories. So if I take a newspaper as an example, through the day, they are putting out elements on social media. By evening or sometimes as the demand increases, they put out a story immediately. The next day I take the newspaper, I see the same thing. So I think they have to now reinvent. And like Mr. Devdas was saying, look at Huffington Post, look at so many others. They're also aggregators. They bring you stories from other newspapers. Even The Guardian, for example, they do a lot of reporting of what the Daily Mail says.
Absolutely. They even send you a media report.
But Indian media does not. Indian media does not. If Hindustan Times has a story, then Indian Express will keep quiet at least for a day, and then they will try to do something over that story. But they will never say it was a Hindustan Times story.
Right. Professor Dev, that's the other question that I was asking, and I think that was the basic premise of the entire show was, why is it that, that the newspapers are so upset?
Like I said at the beginning, this is a mindset. And they're panicking for no reason. This is a clear division there. This comes from a mindset that this is something different from, say, what we are doing in print is very different from what they are doing. This comes from an us versus them mentality, which I think needs to be bridged in this country, and it's already getting bridged in the West. There is nothing, because I know for a reason that in the UK it's not. This is now completely. This works in tandem with the print works in digital
Sure.
works in tandem with the print.
So, our guest
Tell
from
you another thing,
Baltimore. Right.
Just allow me to finish this on an important thing. In the last 10 years in the US, digital media, 500 digital publications have created 5,000 jobs, whereas in the same period of time, last 10 years, the print media has shed 20,000 jobs. So is this an indicator? I don't know. I think this is going to be the same case in India in another 5 years' time.
All right, but before we sort of sign off from you, Professor Devdas, we had Bappa from Baltimore who had made a very interesting point from the outside, saying that perhaps one of the reasons is that since the revenue models of the newspapers, the way they exist, the whole controversy over paid news, that's perhaps the whole fine line between marketing and journalism and the way it's gone. Maybe that's why the traditional newspapers and publications are being so upset about a readership survey saying no one reads them.
Is this to me?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, I don't think the revenue model, for example, for Daily Dish is started making money. And BuzzFeed, and I disagree with one of the speakers and one of the participants earlier said that it's just aggregation. It's not anymore. They are hiring people to do serious investigative journalism, and they are hiring in Bombay now. BuzzFeed has started hiring in Bombay. It's good news for us.
All right.
And
Okay.
they're into very serious journalism. So I disagree with that. If you ask me, is there a benchmark, a golden standard of revenue model? No. And the whole beauty of this digital era is it's okay to be uncertain until we find a right revenue model. It took 100 years for the legacy industry to find a right revenue model. So what's the harm in just waiting?
All right. Yes, you had a point, Srinivas.
Yeah, you see, two things. Number one, when you asked the question to Mr. Bappa that people are skeptical about the traditional media these days because of factors such as paid news and so on. I think as Sanjay ji pointed out, that's a different discussion altogether, because people are moving towards social media to get out certain things that the traditional media is not putting on. Our discussion here is whether traditional media has managed to coexist in the digital space.
Right.
And there's a difference between what's happening in the US and what's happening in India.
Sure.
The histories of the media. I mean, I'm getting into history now. If you look at the print, papers, the custodians of the print media, like Times of India, Hindustan Times, HT, they have, the Hindu, they have, and the Indian Express, they have a history which comes from independence. They have been a true fourth estate in that sense. They have had a role in the formation of the Indian nation, and so they have a certain credibility that towers far more than any other publication in that sense. In the US, on the other hand, it's more of a business model. Media, it's not necessarily seen as it's not necessarily the fourth estate per se, and only some papers which have that credibility are still going strong. So in that sense, in India, print still has the print media still has credibility. What they have to do is to adapt to the times.
Absolutely. So and that's going back to Sanjay's point, adapting to the times. I think the print media in itself will now start to hire people who can look beyond the daily updates and news as well.
Precisely, there are two things. Not many media houses were making profit in any case. Let us accept that fact, and also not many media houses were into serious journalism in any case.
Right.
There are two things.
So now they're on their toes.
Yeah. So a survey of this kind obviously rattles a good number of people. Secondly, like Dhania was pointing it out, Like we, in First Post, for instance, somebody would kind of pub stories as to whatever has appeared in various television channels and newspapers, and if we find that newsworthy, why not give credit to that particular organization and put out that story. Secondly, you have vast degree of space whereby you can analyze, take on somebody, take on issues, talk about priorities, and also put in breaking news. The traditional media in that sense has to adapt to the changing reality. Slowly it is adapting. It's not that they are not adapting. Of course, there are also some thinking minds are sitting there. They also are adapting, but system takes time to make a change, to accept that.
Because it's a legacy, like Srinivas pointed out.
Precisely.
All right. So we'll let Bappa have the last word because you've logged in all the way from Baltimore. Bappa, do you read the Indian newspapers online? Because a lot of sources of news come from there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to respond to Dhania's point that, there's still a lot of following. I would not use the word following for legacy media. I would not use the word following. It's because people log on, like for example, when I wake up in the morning, I log on to ndtv.com not because I trust NDTV. It's because it's the only, because I want to find out what are the news being planted by the powers that be. I mean, because I consider it to be a very pro-establishment website.
Okay, we won't go there, but I think we just running out.
But as news consumers, that is how we get legacy media. So following, just because there are a lot of hits on ndtv.com doesn't mean that it's a more credible news source than News Minute.
Okay,
because
so I think the verdict's out on
also because,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
So that distinction has to be made.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our guests. I think we're running out of time and it's a discussion that can continue. But do keep the conversation alive. Keep posting on IndiaPostLive.com. Join us on Twitter, #IndiaPostLive, and keep watching India Post Live. Thank you for watching.